Standing on that wooden platform in Red Hollow Creek, 18 years old and starving, she could see the hunger in men's eyes, the kind that had nothing to do with food. Her father's gambling debts had brought her here. The cruelest rancher in town was grinning, his bid unchallenged, when a voice like winter thunder stopped everything cold. $500. The crowd went silent. Nobody paid that kind of money, nobody except Wade Barrett, the mountain ghost everyone feared. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. The morning Eliza's father died, she found him face down at the poker table in Murphy's saloon, 3 cards still clutched in his rigid fingers. The dealer wouldn't even look at her, just jerked his thumb toward the door like she was already someone else's problem. She dragged Thomas Mercer home by herself, all 140 pounds of him, through mud that sucked at her boots and made every step feel like the earth wanted to swallow them both. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Nobody helped. They knew what happened to families when the debts came due. The bill arrived 2 days later, $1,700. Her father had been betting with money he'd borrowed from half the territory, using their tiny house as collateral, signing papers with men whose names made decent people cross the street. The lawyer who brought the notice didn't apologize. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the empty cupboards, the girl in a dress that had been mended so many times the original fabric was barely visible. "You got 3 days," he said. "Then the house goes to auction, unless you got some way to pay." Eliza had $12.30. She'd counted it twice. The house sold in 15 minutes. Everything inside, her mother's wedding ring, the photographs, the quilt that had survived the journey west, went with it. The new owner, a banker named Horace Drummond, stood in the doorway and watched her pack one small bag like he was afraid she might steal something that was already his. "There's still the matter of the remaining debt," he said. His voice was soft, almost apologetic, which made it worse somehow. $800 your father owed to various parties. They'll want satisfaction. I don't have it. No, I didn't think you would. He pulled out another paper. There is one option. The town council has authorized we call it an employment auction, for debts that can't be satisfied through property alone. You'd be signing a work contract. 7 years. The buyer would assume your father's debts in exchange for your labor. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and Eliza felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You're selling me." "We're providing you an opportunity to settle your obligations," Drummond corrected. "The alternative is prison. Or worse." She knew what the worse meant. Women alone in Red Hollow Creek had limited options, and most of them ended in the cribs behind the saloons where men paid by the hour and girls died young. The auction was set for Saturday afternoon in the town square. 3 days. She spent them trying to find another way. Anyway. She knocked on the door of every respectable house in Red Hollow Creek, offering to work as a maid, a cook, a governess. The women looked at her with pity and shut the door. The men looked at her differently, and she learned to stop knocking after the third one grabbed her wrist and suggested she could start her employment early if she wanted to make a private arrangement. She tried the general store, the hotel, the dress shop. Nobody was hiring, or rather, nobody was hiring a dead gambler's daughter with no references and $800 in debt hanging over her head like a noose. On Friday night, she sat in the empty house that wasn't hers anymore and tried to figure out which would be worse, prison or 7 years of whatever the buyer demanded. 7 years was longer than she'd been alive in some ways that mattered. She'd be 25 when the contract ended, used up, worn down, if she survived at all. She didn't sleep. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Late autumn in Montana Territory meant frost on the ground and wind that cut through threadbare wool like it wasn't even there. Eliza put on her least mended dress, dark blue cotton that had been her mother's once, and braided her hair with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The auction platform stood in the center of town square, built from fresh pine that still smelled like sap. They'd used it last month to sell a widow's furniture. Before that, a load of mining equipment. Now Eliza climbed the 3 steps and stood where the auctioneer pointed, her hands clasped in front of her to keep them from trembling. The crowd was bigger than she'd expected. Maybe 40 people, mostly men. Some she recognized from church, back when her father still pretended they were respectable. Others were drifters, ranch hands. The kind of men who showed up wherever something was being sold cheap. At the front stood Clayton Voss. Everyone knew Voss. He owned the largest cattle operation in the territory, 5,000 acres of prime grazing land, and a reputation for meanness that extended to everything he touched. His ranch hands quit regularly. His horses were always skittish. He'd buried 2 wives already, and rumor said neither had died of natural causes, though nobody could prove it, and the sheriff wasn't inclined to ask questions. Voss was smiling, looking at Eliza like she was a particularly promising heifer. "All right, folks, settle down." The auctioneer was a fat man named Perkins who did land sales mostly. He looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet Eliza's eyes. "This here is a debt settlement auction authorized by the town council. Miss Eliza Mercer, 18 years old, healthy, literate, decent cook according to her references. Contract is for 7 years of employment. Buyer assumes all outstanding debts totaling $800. Starting bid is $50, someone called from the back. Eliza's cheeks burned. $50. That's what she was worth. Less than a good horse. 50. Do I hear 60? 60. A different voice. 70. The bids came slow at first, men testing the waters, seeing how high the price would climb. Eliza kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, on the mountains rising blue and distant beyond the town. She tried to disappear inside her own head, to be somewhere else, anywhere else. $100. That was Voss. His voice cut through the murmuring crowd like an axe through soft wood. Silence. Men shifted, glanced at each other. Nobody wanted to bid against Clayton Voss. Perkins cleared his throat. $100. Do I hear 120? Nothing. Just wind moving through the empty spaces between buildings, carrying the smell of wood smoke and horses. 100 going once. Eliza closed her eyes. 7 years with Voss. She'd heard the stories about his ranch, the way women servants disappeared or came back to town with bruises they wouldn't explain. 7 years might as well be forever. Going twice. This was it. This was the moment her life ended and something else began, something that would break her into pieces so small there'd be nothing left to put back together. The hammer started to fall. $500. The voice came from the edge of the crowd, deep and rough like stones grinding together. Every head turned. Wade Barrett stood next to a wagon, one hand resting on the side rail like he'd been there the whole time, just watching. He was tall, taller than anyone else in the square, with shoulders that suggested hard work and a face that suggested he didn't do much smiling. Dark hair going gray at the temples. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Hard to tell with men who spent their lives in the mountains. Eliza had seen him before, a few times when he came to town for supplies. He never stayed long, never talked much. The other ranchers gave him space. The townsfolk whispered. Wade Barrett, who'd lost his wife 3 years back. Wade Barrett, who lived so far up in the mountains that most people forgot he existed. Wade Barrett, who was now offering $500 for a girl he'd never spoken to. Perkins' mouth worked silently for a moment. "That's... Mr. Barrett, are you certain? 500 is... I'm certain." Barrett's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. It carried anyway. Voss turned, his face darkening. "That's too high, Barrett. You trying to make some kind of point? Trying to make a bid. That's how auctions work." Barrett's expression didn't change. "Unless you want to go higher." The two men stared at each other across 20 feet of packed dirt. The crowd held its breath. Voss had money. Everyone knew it. He could have matched the bid, could have gone higher just to prove he could. But something in Barrett's stance, in the flat coldness of his gaze, made it clear this wasn't just about money anymore. This was something else. Something that would cost more than dollars if Voss pushed it. "Going once," Perkins said quietly. "Going twice." His hammer fell. "Sold to Wade Barrett for $500. The crowd erupted in whispers. Voss spat in the dirt and stalked away, his boots hitting the ground hard enough to raise dust. Other men drifted off in clusters, already spinning the story they'd tell in saloons tonight. Eliza stood frozen on the platform. $500. More than her father's debts, more than the house had sold for. Why? What did a mountain rancher want with her that badly? Barrett approached the platform, moving through the dispersing crowd like water parting around a stone. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the scar running through his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands that spoke of rope and leather and hard winters. "Miss Mercer." He nodded once. "Get your things. We're leaving." "I—" Her voice came out scratchy. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because Voss is a bastard, and you don't deserve whatever he had planned." Barrett's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "And because I need help at my ranch. Those are the only reasons that matter. Now get your things." She climbed down from the platform on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Her one bag was sitting where she'd left it, next to the general store. Everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Barrett waited by the wagon. When she approached, he took the bag without asking and stowed it in the back with the efficiency that suggested he didn't waste time on unnecessary conversation. "Can you ride?" he asked. "What?" "A horse. Can you ride one?" Yes. "A little." "Good enough." He gestured to the wagon seat. "Climb up. It's a long drive and we're burning daylight." Eliza hesitated. Behind her, Red Hollow Creek was already forgetting she existed. Ahead, a strange man and a journey into mountains she'd never seen. The devil you know versus the devil you don't. But Voss had been the devil she knew, and that particular hell had been guaranteed. She climbed up. Barrett took the reins without ceremony and clicked to the horses. The wagon lurched forward, wheels creaking, and just like that they were leaving. Past the saloon where her father had died. Past the house she'd grown up in. Past the church that had stopped welcoming them years ago when the gambling got bad. Nobody waved goodbye. They rode in silence for the first hour, the town falling away behind them until it was just a smudge of smoke on the horizon. The road, barely more than wagon ruts really, climbed steadily into hills thick with pine and aspen. The air got colder, cleaner. Eliza wrapped her shawl tighter and tried to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. Finally, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "What kind of work?" she asked. Barrett glanced at her, then back at the road. "Cooking, cleaning, looking after my children, same as any housekeeper." Children. That was better than she'd feared. "How many?" "2. Twins, Emma and Luke, 9 years old." Something complicated crossed his face. "They're spirited. Spirited. They've chased off the last 4 women I hired." He said it plainly, like he was reporting crop yields. "Snakes in beds, salt in the sugar jar. Last one found her clothes sewn together while she slept." Despite everything, Eliza felt something that might have been a laugh trying to escape. She swallowed it down. "They don't want a housekeeper." "They don't want a replacement for their mother," Barrett corrected. "Not sure they understand the difference yet." "How long has she been—" 3 years this January. His hands tightened slightly on the reins. Fever took her fast. Didn't have time to say goodbye properly. The wagon rattled over a particularly rough patch. Eliza gripped the seat to keep from being bounced off. "I'm sorry," she said, because it seemed like the thing to say. Barrett nodded once, didn't elaborate. More silence. The road got steeper. They passed a frozen creek, its surface like dark glass between snow-covered banks. A hawk circled overhead, hunting. "Why did you really bid on me?" Eliza asked. "The truth, not the answer you gave in town." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I've got 2 children who need a woman's influence before they turn completely feral. I've got a ranch that's falling apart because I can't do everything myself. And I've got enough money to pay top dollar for someone who might actually stick around longer than a month." He looked at her directly. "Plus, I saw you handle your father's funeral. You carried him home yourself when every man in town pretended not to notice. That takes spine." "You were there?" "I was picking up supplies. Saw the whole thing." His expression didn't change. "Figured anyone tough enough to do that might be tough enough to handle my kids." It wasn't a compliment exactly, but it wasn't pity either, and Eliza had had enough pity to last a lifetime. "The contract," she said, 7 years, that's legal. You could—" "I could." Barrett's voice went flat. "I won't. You'll work for fair wages, get room and board, and if after a year you want to leave, you can. I'll pay your way to wherever you want to go." "That's not what the contract says." "I don't care what the contract says. I'm telling you how it's going to be." He glanced at her again. I'm not Voss. I'm not looking for a slave or anything else. I'm looking for help. If you do the work, we'll get along fine." Eliza studied his profile. The hard line of his jaw, the scar, the way he held himself like a man who'd been tested and survived. Either he was telling the truth, or he was a very good liar. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll do the work." Barrett almost smiled. Almost. "We'll see how you feel after you meet the twins." Bad. The ranch appeared just as the sun hit the western peaks. Frost Ridge, Barrett called it, and Eliza could see why. Everything was white and gray and dark green, snow on the ground, frost on the trees, pines so thick they blocked out most of the dying light. The house was bigger than she'd expected. 2 stories, built from logs that had darkened with age and weather. Smoke rose from the chimney. Outbuildings clustered nearby. A barn, a bunkhouse, what looked like a smokehouse and root cellar. Fence lines stretched out toward pastures where cattle moved like dark shapes in the twilight. Barrett pulled the wagon up to the main house and set the brake. Before he could climb down, the front door banged open and 2 figures exploded onto the porch. The twins. They were identical in the way only 9-year-olds could be, all tangled hair and sharp eyes and energy that seemed barely contained by their skin. The girl, Emma, Eliza assumed, wore boys' clothes, trousers, and a shirt that had seen better days. The boy had mud on his face and was holding what looked like a dead snake. "You brought another one?" Emma's voice was accusing. "Pa, you said you weren't gonna—" "I said I wasn't going to hire anyone from town," Barrett interrupted, climbing down. "This is different. Miss Mercer, meet Emma and Luke. Try not to let them scare you off in the first 5 minutes." Luke held up the snake. "Want to see? I killed it myself." "It was already dead," Emma said. "You found it behind the barn." "I killed it last week. Still counts." Eliza climbed down from the wagon carefully. Her legs ached from the long ride. Everything ached, actually, but she kept her expression neutral as she faced the twins. "Hello?" she said. "That's a very dead snake." Luke looked disappointed that she hadn't screamed. Emma just stared, evaluating. "You from town?" Emma asked. "Yes." "Town girls don't last. They cry when it gets cold, and they can't cook nothing we like, and they leave." Emma crossed her arms. "You're probably going to leave too." "Maybe," Eliza said honestly. "But I'm here now, so we might as well make the best of it." That seemed to throw them both off balance. They looked at each other, some silent twin communication passing between them. Barrett grabbed Eliza's bag from the wagon. "Emma, show Miss Mercer to the spare room. Luke, put that snake back where you found it and wash your hands, twice." "But Pa—" "Twice." The boy slouched off toward the barn, dragging the snake. Emma remained on the porch, still staring at Eliza with an expression that suggested she was planning something. "Come on then," Emma said finally. "Room's upstairs. Don't touch nothing that ain't yours." The inside of the house was warmer, but not much tidier. The main room held a large fireplace, a rough-hewn table, chairs that didn't match, and clutter that spoke of people who were too busy surviving to worry about neatness. Dishes sat in a basin. Mud had been tracked across the floor. A shirt hung drying from the back of a chair. Emma led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor. 3 doors. One opened to reveal a chaos of blankets and clothes that had to be the twins' room, one closed and one that Emma pushed open with her foot. "Here. Used to be the sewing room before Ma died. Now it's just where we put people." The room was small but clean, a bed with a faded quilt, a washstand, a window that looked out over the darkening valley. Someone, Barrett probably, had already put fresh water in the pitcher. Emma dumped Eliza's bag on the floor. "Supper's at 6. You're expected to cook it." "What do you like to eat?" The girl blinked. Nobody had asked her that before, apparently. Stew, I guess. Biscuits, bacon when we got it." "I can make that." Eliza set her bag on the bed. "What don't you like?" "Turnips." Emma made a face. "Pa tries to make us eat them, but they taste like dirt." "Noted. No turnips." Another pause. Emma studied her with those sharp eyes. "You really not scared of Luke's snake?" "It was dead. Dead things can't hurt you." "Most girls scream anyway." "I'm not most girls." Eliza sat on the bed, testing it. Decent mattress. She'd slept on worse. Your pa said you've scared off 4 housekeepers. What did you do to the last one? Emma's face split into a grin that was pure mischief. Sewed all her clothes together while she was sleeping. Every single thing. When she woke up and tried to get dressed, the sleeves were attached to the skirts, and the stockings were tied to the... Emma, Barrett's voice came from downstairs. Leave Miss Mercer alone and go set the table. I'm just talking. Now please. The girl rolled her eyes but headed for the door. At the threshold, she looked back. You probably won't last neither, just so you know. Then she was gone, her footsteps thundering down the stairs. Eliza sat in the silence, looking around the small room that was now hers. Home. This was home now, or something like it. She'd gone from auction block to mountain ranch in less than a day, and her head still hadn't caught up with her feet. Through the window, she could see the last light fading from the peaks. Stars were starting to appear, more than she'd ever seen in town. The air smelled like pine and snow and wood smoke. She thought about Barrett's words. I saw you handle your father's funeral. That takes spine. Maybe it did. Maybe she had more spine than she'd realized. Or maybe she was just too tired to be scared anymore. Supper was an experiment in chaos. Eliza found the kitchen, a lean-to addition off the main room, and took stock of what she had to work with. A cast-iron stove that was older than she was, but still functional. Supplies that ranged from well-stocked flour, salt, coffee, to nearly empty, everything else. A side of bacon hanging in the cold room, potatoes in a bin, dried beans in jars. She set to work. The twins watched her like hawks, waiting for her to fail. Barrett sat at the table, ostensibly reading through some kind of ledger, but clearly also paying attention. The ranch hands, she'd seen 3 of them in the barn, apparently ate in the bunkhouse, which simplified things. Eliza made biscuits the way her mother had taught her, working the dough until it felt right. Not measuring because measurements never worked at altitude. She fried bacon and potatoes, made coffee so strong it could probably strip paint. The whole time nobody said a word, just watched. When she set the plates down, Emma poked at her biscuit suspiciously. It's not going to explode or nothing, is it? Only one way to find out, Eliza said. Luke took a bite, chewed, swallowed, took another bite. Emma followed suit, clearly unwilling to let her brother be braver than her. Barrett tried the coffee first, then the food. His expression didn't change, but he ate everything on his plate and took seconds on the biscuits. These are good, Luke said finally, his mouth full. Don't talk with your mouth full, Barrett said automatically. But they are good. Better than the last lady's. Hers tasted like paste. That's because you put paste in the flour jar, Emma pointed out. Oh yeah, Luke grinned. Forgot about that. Eliza kept her expression neutral. Good to know. I'll check the flour before I use it tomorrow. The twins exchanged glances. Emma kicked her brother under the table. After supper, Eliza washed dishes while Barrett got the twins ready for bed. She could hear them upstairs, the sound of running feet, protests about teeth brushing, Luke claiming he wasn't tired even though he'd been yawning for the last hour. The kitchen window looked out over darkness. She couldn't see the mountains now, but she could feel them, the weight of all that stone and snow surrounding the ranch like walls. She was drying the last plate when Barrett came back down. They're in bed, he said. Whether they're sleeping is another question. They seem like good kids. They're terrors. But there was something almost fond in his voice. You did well tonight, the food, I mean, and handling them. I haven't handled anything yet. This was just the first round. Still. He poured himself more coffee, leaned against the counter. The last woman quit after 3 days. One before that made it a week. You might actually have a chance. Eliza set the plate down. Now that the work was done, the exhaustion was catching up with her. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. What happened to your wife? If you don't want to talk about it, Sarah. He said the name carefully, like it still hurt. She got sick in the winter. Just a cold at first, but it settled in her lungs and wouldn't leave. By the time I realized how bad it was, the passes were snowed in. Couldn't get a doctor up here. She died on a Tuesday morning, with the twins holding her hands. Eliza felt something twist in her chest. I'm sorry. Yeah, Barrett stared into his coffee. Me too. They were 6. Old enough to understand what death meant, but too young to know how to handle it. They've been difficult ever since. Difficult how? angry, sad, scared. I'm going to leave them too, I think, though they'd never admit it. He rubbed his face. They chase off the housekeepers because if nobody sticks around, they can't get attached, can't get hurt again. That makes sense. It makes my life hell, but there was no real heat in it. I've tried talking to them, tried punishing them, tried ignoring it. Nothing works. Eventually, I just started hoping I'd find someone stubborn enough to outlast their defenses. And you think that's me? Barrett looked at her directly. I saw you carry your dead father through town while people pretended not to see. You didn't cry. Didn't ask for help. Just did what needed doing. He set his cup down. That's the kind of stubborn I need. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if it was a compliment or just an observation. Get some sleep, Barrett said. Morning comes early on a ranch. She headed for the stairs, then paused. Mr. Barrett. Wade, thank you for, she gestured vaguely. Not being Voss. His expression darkened slightly. That's a low bar, Miss Mercer. Eliza. And yes, but it's the bar I was facing today. He nodded once. Sleep well, Eliza. She climbed the stairs, found her room, closed the door. Through the thin walls, she could hear the twins whispering to each other, plotting something, probably. Below, Wade's footsteps moved through the house, banking the fire, checking locks. Eliza lay down on his bed fully clothed, too tired to change, and stared at the ceiling. This morning she'd been sold like property. Tonight she was in a stranger's house, surrounded by mountains, responsible for 2 children who would probably spend the next week trying to break her. But she was warm, fed, safe maybe, as safe as anywhere. She thought about her father, about the house she'd lost, about the life that had ended on that auction platform. Then she thought about Emma's grin when she described sewing the housekeeper's clothes together, Luke's pride in his dead snake, Wade's scarred hands and careful words. This wasn't home, not yet, maybe never, but it was a chance, and chances were all Eliza had ever wanted. She closed her eyes and let the sound of wind in the pines carry her toward sleep, toward tomorrow, toward whatever came next in this strange new life she'd been bought into. Outside, the mountains stood their eternal watch, indifferent and ancient, holding their secrets close. Eliza woke to the sound of something crashing downstairs. Her eyes snapped open in the pre-dawn darkness, heart hammering, momentarily confused about where she was. Then memory caught up. The ranch, the mountains, the twins who'd promised she wouldn't last. Another crash. Then giggling. She pulled on her boots and headed downstairs, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders against the cold. The main room was still dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. The noise was coming from the kitchen. When she pushed through the door, she found both twins standing on chairs, reaching into the high cupboards. Flour dusted the floor like fresh snow. A pot lay overturned near the stove. What are you doing? Eliza asked. Emma spun around so fast she nearly fell off the chair. Luke froze with his hand still in the cupboard, looking like a raccoon caught in a henhouse. Nothing, Emma said quickly. Too quickly. Eliza crossed her arms and waited. She'd learned long ago that silence made people more nervous than questions. Luke cracked first. We were just checking if you poisoned the flour. By dumping it all over the floor? The bag slipped, Emma said defensively. And we weren't dumping it. We were testing it. At 4 a.m. Pa gets up at 4:30. We wanted to make sure breakfast wouldn't kill nobody. Eliza looked at the mess, at their guilty faces, at the clearly deliberate disaster they'd created. The last housekeeper probably would have started yelling. The one before that might have cried. That's what they expected. Some kind of reaction they could use as proof that she was just like all the others. Instead, Eliza walked to the cupboard, pulled down 2 more cups of flour, and dumped them on the floor herself. The twins stared. There, Eliza said. Now we've got enough for a proper test. Emma, get me 3 eggs. Luke, I need that bacon from the cold room. Let's make breakfast. But the mess, Emma sputtered. We'll clean it after we eat. Unless you're too scared to help cook? That did it. Emma's chin went up. I ain't scared of nothing. Good. Then get the eggs. For a moment, Eliza thought they might refuse just on principle. Then Luke scrambled down from his chair and headed for the cold room. Emma followed with the egg basket, shooting suspicious glances over her shoulder like she expected a trap. Eliza got the stove going, coaxing the fire to life while the twins gathered ingredients. The flour on the floor crunched under their feet. She'd deal with that later. Right now, she had a point to prove. "You know how to crack an egg?" she asked Emma. "Course I do. I'm not stupid." "Didn't say you were. Show me." Emma cracked an egg against the bowl with more force than necessary. It splattered slightly, but she got most of it in. Luke returned with the bacon, and Eliza set him to slicing it while she mixed biscuit dough. They worked in wary silence, the twins clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop. When it didn't, they started relaxing, just slightly. "Ma used to let us help cook," Luke said quietly. "Before." "Yeah?" Eliza kept her voice neutral, gave him space to continue or not. "She made real good pancakes. Better than biscuits, even." He paused. "But she died, and now there's just biscuits." Emma kicked him under the table. "Don't talk about that." "Why not? It's true." "Because," Emma's voice went tight. "Just because." Eliza slid the biscuits into the oven. "My mother died when I was 12, pneumonia. I used to help her cook too." Both twins looked at her. "Did you stop making her recipes?" Emma asked carefully. "For a while. Hurt too much." Eliza started laying bacon in the pan. Then I realized that was stupid. The recipes were the only piece of her I had left that was worth keeping. "What about your pa?" Luke asked. "He wasn't worth keeping." That surprised a laugh out of Emma. Luke grinned. They were still grinning when Wade came downstairs 20 minutes later, drawn by the smell of bacon and coffee. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, taking in the flour-covered floor, the twins actually helping set the table, Eliza managing the stove like she'd been doing it for years. "Morning," he said carefully. "Morning, Pa," Luke chirped. "We're making breakfast." "I can see that. Why is there flour everywhere?" "Testing," Emma said quickly. "For poison." Wade looked at Eliza. She shrugged. "Seemed reasonable. You can't be too careful." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No, I suppose you can't." Breakfast was better than last night's supper. The twins told stories about a coyote they'd seen near the north pasture, arguing about whether it was the same one from last month or a different one. Wade mostly listened, occasionally correcting facts or adding details, his eyes moving between his children and the woman who'd somehow gotten them to talk about their mother without falling apart. After they ate, Eliza shooed everyone out and tackled the flour disaster. It took an hour to scrub the floor clean, and by the time she finished, her knees ached and her hands were red from the cold water. But the kitchen was spotless, and she'd found where the twins had hidden a small sack of salt behind the flour bin, insurance for their next attempt at sabotage, probably. She dumped the salt back where it belonged and said nothing about it. The days developed a rhythm after that. Wade left before dawn to work with the ranch hands, checking cattle and mending fence lines and doing the 1,000 tasks that kept a ranch running through winter. The twins were supposed to do lessons. Wade had primers and slates set up in the main room, but they spent more time plotting than studying. Eliza quickly learned their patterns. Emma was the planner, methodical and careful. Luke was the chaos agent, willing to try anything if it sounded fun. Together, they were twice as dangerous as they should have been. The first week, they put a frog in Eliza's bed. She caught it, named it Herbert, and kept it in a jar on the kitchen windowsill as a pet. The second week, they replaced the sugar with salt in her coffee. She drank it anyway, didn't even flinch, then asked if they could pass the salt because clearly she hadn't gotten enough. The third week, they hid all her hairpins. She braided her hair without them and complimented Emma on her excellent hiding skills. Every attempt failed because Eliza refused to react the way they wanted. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't threaten to leave. She just kept cooking and cleaning and treating them like actual human beings instead of obstacles. It was driving them crazy. "She's not normal," Emma announced one afternoon. They were in the barn, supposedly collecting eggs, but really hiding from afternoon chores. "Normal people get mad." "Maybe she's stupid," Luke suggested. He was dangling upside down from a beam, face going red. "She's not stupid. She's something else." Emma scowled at a chicken that was eyeing her suspiciously. "I don't like it." "You don't like anything." "I like things, just not her." But that wasn't entirely true, and Emma knew it. The truth was more complicated. Eliza told stories while she worked, real stories, not boring ones about letters and numbers. She let them help in the kitchen without acting like they'd break everything. She didn't flinch when Luke brought in dead things. And she didn't treat Emma like a doll that needed to wear dresses and act proper. More than that, she didn't pretend to be their mother. She didn't try to hug them or call them sweetie or any of that garbage the other housekeepers had pulled. She was just there, steady, constant. It was confusing. We need a bigger plan, Emma decided. Something she can't just ignore. Luke dropped from the beam, landing in a heap. Like what? I'm thinking. What Emma came up with took 3 days to prepare. They recruited one of the ranch hands, a young guy named Tommy who thought the twins were hilarious, to help them catch a skunk. Then they smuggled it into the house in a crate and planned to release it in Eliza's room while she slept. The plan fell apart when Luke sneaked upstairs ahead of schedule and accidentally knocked the crate over. The skunk, understandably upset about being kidnapped, sprayed everything within 10 feet, including Luke. His screams brought the whole house running. Eliza got there first, assessed the situation in 2 seconds flat, and hauled Luke downstairs by his collar while he wailed about his eyes burning. Wade arrived from the barn to find his son stripped naked in the yard, Eliza dumping bucket after bucket of cold water over him while Luke shrieked. "What in the hell?" Wade started. "Skunk," Eliza said shortly. "In his room. Emma, get me the tomato juice from the cellar. Now." Emma, who'd been frozen on the porch, ran. Wade looked at his son, at Eliza's soaked dress, at the chaos. "Do I want to know?" "Probably not." The skunk took another hour to catch. Wade finally cornered it with a blanket and released it far from the house. Luke's room had to be aired out, all his clothes burned, and the boy himself scrubbed 3 times with tomato juice before the smell faded to merely awful. Through it all, Eliza didn't say a word about blame or consequences. She just worked, steady and practical, like this was normal Tuesday business. That night, after Luke was tucked into bed in the spare room, his own still uninhabitable, Emma found Eliza in the kitchen, boiling more water for laundry. "You're not going to tell on us, are you?" Emma asked quietly. Eliza looked at her. "Tell your pa that you smuggled a skunk into the house to try and drive me away? I think he figured that out himself. He's going to be real mad. Probably." Eliza stirred the pot. "You going to try something like that again?" Emma shifted her weight, not quite meeting Eliza's eyes. "Maybe. Then I guess we'll deal with it when it happens." "You're weird," Emma said. "Not mean, just factual." "Yeah, I get that a lot. The other ladies, they always acted nice at first, real sweet and fake. Then they'd get mad later and say we were horrible and ungrateful, and they didn't get paid enough for this." Emma picked at a splinter on the doorframe. "You've been mad since the first day, but you don't leave." Eliza considered that. "I'm not mad at you. I'm just tired and trying to figure out how to live here without pretending to be somebody I'm not." "Who are you then?" "Still working that out." Emma nodded slowly, like that made sense. "Luke didn't mean to let the skunk out early. He just wanted to see it one more time." "I know. You gonna make him feel bad about it?" "Kid dumped skunk spray on himself and lost all his clothes. I think he feels bad enough." Eliza met Emma's eyes. "You want to help me with this laundry, or are you going to stand there asking questions all night?" Emma grabbed a basket without another word. They worked side by side in silence, the steam from the pot making the kitchen warm and damp. Outside, the temperature was dropping fast. It was late November now, and the real winter was settling in. Wade said the passes would close soon, trapping them on the mountain until spring. Trapped. That word should have scared Eliza. Instead, it felt almost safe. "My ma's birthday is next week," Emma said suddenly. "December 1st. We don't... Pa doesn't like talking about it." Eliza kept working. What was she like? Pretty. She had yellow hair and she sang all the time, dumb songs about flowers and birds and stuff. Emma's voice went quiet. "She made Luke and me matching quilts for our 6th birthday. Said we'd always have a piece of home wherever we went." "That's nice." "Luke still sleeps with his every night. Won't admit it, but he does." Emma dunked a shirt in the water, wrung it out with more force than necessary. "I put mine away. Seems stupid to look at it." "You miss her." "Yeah, but being sad don't bring her back, so what's the point?" Eliza thought about her own mother, about the years of missing that had eventually dulled to a constant ache. The point is remembering, even when it hurts. Emma didn't answer, just kept working, her small hands red from the hot water. Later, after the laundry was hung and Emma had gone to check on Luke, Wade found Eliza sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in her shawl against the cold. "You handled that well," he said, settling down beside her. "The skunk situation. Didn't have much choice." "You had every choice. Could have marched downstairs and demanded I punish them. Insisted they were out of control and you were leaving." He looked at her. "That's what the others did." "The others didn't grow up with a gambler for a father. I've dealt with worse than a skunk." Eliza pulled her shawl tighter. "Besides, they're just kids. Scared kids trying to protect themselves the only way they know how." "You see that, huh?" "It's not exactly subtle." Wade almost smiled. "Emma tell you about Sarah's birthday?" "Yeah. She asks every year if we can skip it. Pretend it's just another day." He stared out at the dark mountains. "I tell her no. We make Sarah's favorite meal, light a candle, say her name out loud. It kills me every time, but I do it because they need to know it's okay to remember." "That's good." "Is it? Sometimes I think I'm just making it worse, keeping the wound fresh." Eliza thought about the daguerreotype in her room, her parents frozen young and happy, before everything fell apart. "My father never talked about my mother after she died. Just drank himself stupid and acted like she'd never existed. I used to wonder if he forgot her, or if remembering hurt so much he couldn't stand it." "Which was it?" "Don't know. He took that answer with him." She stood, brushed off her skirt. "But I know which one felt worse for me. The silence. Like she didn't matter enough to be sad about." Wade nodded slowly. "Sarah mattered. Matters. Even now. Then keep saying her name. The twins will hate it and love it, and hate that they love it. But they'll remember." Eliza headed for the door, then paused. "And for what it's worth, I think you're doing okay. The kids are terrors, but they're yours. That counts for something." She went inside before he could respond, leaving Wade alone with the stars and the cold and the memory of a woman who'd died too young. The next week brought the first real snow. It started as flurries during breakfast, and by noon was coming down in thick curtains that erased the world beyond the porch. The twins pressed their faces against the window, arguing about whether this was enough snow to build a fort. "It's Montana," Wade said, pulling on his heavy coat. "We'll have enough snow to build a castle by tomorrow. Right now I need to check on the cattle before we lose visibility completely." "Can we come?" Luke asked. "No, too dangerous. You stay inside with Eliza." Both twins groaned, but they didn't argue. They'd learned young that when Pa used that tone, arguing was pointless. Wade left, and the house settled into snow day quiet. Eliza set the twins to their lessons. Actual lessons this time, not the half-hearted attempts they usually made. Emma struggled with arithmetic, but excelled at reading. Luke was the opposite, flying through numbers but stumbling over words. "I hate reading," Luke announced after butchering the same sentence 3 times. "It's stupid." "It's not stupid," Emma said. "You're stupid." "Am not." "Are too." "Hey." Eliza's voice cut through the escalating fight. "Both of you stop. Luke, why do you think reading is stupid?" He scowled at his primer. "The words don't make sense. They're all jumbled up." "Jumbled how?" "I don't know. They just are. Like the letters trade places when I'm not looking." Eliza moved closer, looked at the page he was struggling with. She'd seen this before. One of the neighbor kids back in Red Hollow Creek had the same problem. Smart as anything with numbers, but put words in front of him and they might as well have been written backwards. "Emma, read the first sentence," Eliza said. Emma read it perfectly, then looked smug. "Now, Luke, tell me what Emma just read. In your own words." Luke thought for a moment. "The dog ran after the rabbit, but the rabbit was faster, so it got away." "That's exactly right. So the problem isn't that you're stupid. The problem is your brain works different with reading than Emma's does." Eliza tapped the page. "How about this? Emma reads the lessons out loud. You listen and tell me what they mean. Then I know you actually understand instead of just saying words." Luke brightened. "Really? Really? But you still have to try reading yourself sometimes. Deal?" "Deal." They worked that way for another hour, Emma reading with dramatic flair while Luke listened and explained. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than fighting. And by the end, both twins were actually learning something instead of just killing time. The snow kept falling. Wade came back around 3, covered in white, stamping his feet on the porch. "How's it looking?" Eliza asked, handing him coffee. "Bad. We're going to be snowed in for a while. Maybe a week or 2 if this keeps up." He wrapped his hands around the cup. "Hope you laid in enough supplies." "We're fine. I've been rationing since I got here." "Course you have." Wade smiled slightly. "The passes will close tonight. Nobody in or out until spring thaw." That night, Eliza lay in bed listening to the wind howl around the eaves. Snowed in, trapped on a mountain with a widower and his 2 feral children until spring. 6 months ago, that would have terrified her. Now it just felt like life. The twins' war of attrition continued, but the tactics changed. They were testing still, always testing, but the malice had faded into something more like curiosity. Emma started asking Eliza questions while they worked, about her mother, her childhood, why she never got married. Luke showed her his collection of interesting rocks and dead insects, explaining in great detail why each one was special. They were softening, not surrendering, not accepting, just softening. Sarah's birthday arrived cold and clear. Wade was tense all morning, barely speaking. The twins moved around each other carefully, like they were trying not to break something fragile. Eliza made chicken and dumplings. Emma had mentioned once that it was Sarah's favorite. She didn't say anything about it, just served dinner and sat down like it was any other meal. Wade stared at his plate for a long moment, then looked at her. "How did you know?" "Emma told me." Eliza passed the bread. "Figured if we're remembering, might as well do it right." After dinner, Wade pulled out a tintype from somewhere. Sarah Barrett smiled up from the frame, young and pretty like Emma had said, with laugh lines around her eyes. He set it on the table, lit a candle next to it. 7 years ago today, Wade said quietly, "I married the stubbornest woman in Montana. She was 22. I was 25. We were both too young and too stupid to know what we were getting into." Emma giggled despite herself. "She gave me 2 beautiful children who are also too stubborn for their own good." Wade looked at the twins. "And she loved you both more than anything in this world. You know that, right?" Luke nodded. Emma stared at her plate. "She'd be proud of you," Wade continued, "even when you're terrors. Especially when you're terrors, probably. That's her influence showing through." "What about you, Pa?" Luke asked. "Is she proud of you?" Wade's jaw tightened. "I hope so. I'm trying." They sat in silence for a while, the candle flickering. Then Emma spoke, her voice small. "I'm sorry I put her quilt away. I just didn't want to look at it anymore." "That's okay, sweetheart. Everyone grieves different. But you said we should remember." "And you do, in your own way." Wade reached across the table, squeezed her hand. "The quilt will be there when you're ready. No rush." Eliza started clearing plates quietly, giving them space, but Emma's voice stopped her. "Eliza should hear too. About Ma." Wade looked surprised. "You sure?" "Yeah. She lives here now. She should know." So Wade told stories about how he'd met Sarah at a barn dance, how she'd stepped on his foot 3 times and blamed him for being in the way, about their wedding day when it rained so hard the creek flooded and they had to wade across in their good clothes, about the twins' birth, how Sarah had been so scared and so brave, and how she'd held both babies and cried from joy. The twins listened like they'd heard these stories 100 times but still needed to hear them again. Eliza listened too, seeing the shape of the family that had existed before she arrived, understanding the ghost she'd been living alongside all this time. When Wade finally blew out the candle, Luke was crying quietly. Emma was holding his hand under the table, her face set hard against her own tears. "Bedtime," Wade said gently. "Can Eliza tuck us in?" Emma asked. Everyone froze. Even Emma looked surprised she'd said it. "If she doesn't mind," Wade said carefully. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. The twins' room was still a disaster, but Eliza was used to that by now. She helped Luke find his quilt, the one his mother had made, threadbare now from use. Pulled the blankets up to Emma's chin, even though the girl insisted she wasn't cold. "You miss your ma too, don't you?" Luke asked. "Yeah, every day." "Does it get better?" Eliza thought about lying, about offering comfort, then decided they deserved the truth. "It gets different. Not better. Just different. You learn to carry it." Emma rolled over to face the wall. "Thanks for making the dumplings." "You're welcome." And for not leaving when we were awful. You weren't awful. You were protecting yourselves. We were pretty awful, Luke said. The skunk was my idea. I'm sorry about the skunk. I know, and I forgive you about the skunk. She started to leave, but Emma's voice stopped her at the door. Eliza, you can stay, if you want. We won't try to run you off no more. It wasn't quite acceptance, but it was close enough. Thanks, Emma. I appreciate that. Downstairs, Wade was sitting by the fire, the tintype still in his hands. They asked for you, he said. That's progress. Maybe. Definitely. He set the photo down. When Sarah died, they stopped letting anyone close. Pushed away every nanny, every housekeeper, every well-meaning neighbor who tried to help. You're the first person they've let in since. I didn't do anything special. You stayed. That's the most special thing of all. Wade looked at her, really looked at her. You could have run a dozen times by now. Should have, probably. But you didn't. Why? Eliza sat down across from him. Because I didn't have anywhere else to go, and because... She paused, trying to find the right words. Because broken things recognize each other. Your kids lost their mother. I lost my whole life. We're all just trying to figure out how to keep going. That's bleak. That's honest. Wade smiled slightly. Fair enough? The fire crackled. Snow tapped against the windows. Somewhere in the house, the twins were finally sleeping. Thank you, Wade said quietly. For today, for all of it. You already thanked me, with $500 and a roof over my head. That's not the same. No, Eliza agreed, but it's enough. It wasn't, not really, but it was what they both needed to believe right now, so she let it stand. Winter tightened its grip on Frost Ridge Ranch. The snow piled higher. The temperature dropped until the cold became something physical, a presence that invaded every corner despite the fires. They burned through wood faster than expected, and Wade spent long days cutting more, coming home exhausted and ice-covered. The twins grew restless, cooped up inside with nothing but lessons and chores. They fought more, bickered over nothing, drove each other and everyone else half crazy. But they didn't test Eliza anymore. That war was over, replaced by something tentative and new. They helped with cooking without being asked, did their lessons with minimal complaining. Emma even showed Eliza where she'd hidden all those hairpins, returning them sheepishly. We done being terrors? Eliza asked, amused. We're taking a break, Emma said seriously. Might start again later if you get boring. I'll do my best to stay interesting. Christmas came and went quietly. They didn't have much. Wade carved the twins' wooden animals. Eliza made them each a warm scarf from old blankets. The twins gave her a rock they'd painted to look like a frog, which she declared was better than Herbert, and put on her windowsill. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. January brought cold that made November look like a joke. The kind of cold that froze water in the bucket overnight. That turned your breath to ice on your scarf. That made the ranch hands huddle in the bunkhouse and refuse to come out except for essential tasks. And then, 3 weeks into the new year, both twins woke up with fevers. At first, Eliza thought it was just a cold. Kids got sick in winter. It was normal, expected even. Emma complained of a headache at breakfast, picked at her food without eating. Luke said his throat hurt, and could he skip lessons today? You're both fine, Wade said, distracted by a problem with the water pump. Bundle up if you're cold. But by noon, Emma was shivering despite sitting right next to the fire. Luke's forehead felt hot when Eliza pressed her hand against it, and his eyes had that glassy look that meant fever. Wade, she called. He came in from outside, still wearing his heavy coat, ice clinging to his beard. Took one look at the twins huddled under blankets, and his face changed. How long have they been like this? Since breakfast. Getting worse. Wade crossed the room in 3 strides, touched Luke's forehead, then Emma's. His hand lingered a moment too long, and Eliza saw something flicker across his face. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. It's probably nothing, he said, but his voice was tight. Just a winter bug. Keep them warm, plenty of water. They'll shake it off. Except they didn't shake it off. By evening, both fevers were climbing. Emma couldn't keep water down. Luke's cough rattled in his chest, wet and thick. They lay in their beds, too miserable to even fight with each other. Eliza brought cool cloths, tried to get them to drink broth, checked their temperatures obsessively. The fevers held steady through the night, not getting better, but not getting dramatically worse either. Wade sat in a chair between their beds, watching them with an intensity that made Eliza's stomach clench. "You should sleep," she told him around midnight. "Can't." "Wade?" "I said I can't." He didn't look at her. "Sarah started like this, just a fever and a cough. I told her it was nothing, that she'd shake it off." His jaw worked. 3 weeks later, she was dead. The words fell into the quiet room like stones into deep water. Eliza sat down slowly. "This isn't the same thing. You don't know that. And you don't know it is." She kept her voice steady, even though her own fear was starting to build. "Kids get sick, Wade. Most of them get better. Most isn't all." No, it wasn't. They took turns through that night and into the next day. One would sit with the twins while the other slept in snatches, never more than an hour at a time. The fevers climbed higher. Emma started talking in her sleep, nonsense words that tumbled over each other. Luke's breathing got more labored. "We need a doctor," Eliza said on the second morning. Wade looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "Doctor's in Red Hollow Creek. That's a full day's ride in good weather. With the passes snowed in?" He shook his head. "Nobody's getting through, not until spring. There has to be something." "There isn't." His voice cracked slightly. "We're on our own." Eliza had never felt so helpless in her life. She knew how to cook, how to clean, how to survive on almost nothing. But she didn't know how to fight whatever was burning through these children. Didn't know what to do when the remedies she tried, willow bark tea, cool baths, mustard plasters, did nothing to bring the fevers down. On the third day, Emma started coughing blood. Not much, just flecks in her handkerchief, but enough to make Wade go white. "No," he whispered. "Not again. Please, not again." Emma looked up at him with fever-bright eyes. "Pa? I don't feel good." "I know, sweetheart. I know." He smoothed her sweat-damp hair back. "You're going to be fine. Both of you are going to be fine." He said it like a prayer, like if he repeated it enough times, he could make it true. That night was the worst. Both twins burning with fever, coughing until they couldn't catch their breath. Luke threw up twice, thin and bitter. Emma cried, which she never did, clutching her mother's quilt and asking why it hurt so much. Wade paced like a caged animal, his fear a living thing that filled the room and made it hard to breathe. Every hour he'd check their temperatures, his hands shaking. Every time the result was the same, too high, dangerously high, he'd close his eyes like he was bracing for a blow. Eliza made herself useful because it was the only thing she could do. Changed sheets, brought fresh water, kept the fire going, forced herself to stay calm even when she wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. Around 3 a.m, Wade finally broke. "I can't do this again," he said hoarsely. He was standing at the window, staring out at the snow-covered darkness. "I can't watch them die. I can't." His voice cut off. Eliza went to him, put a hand on his arm and felt him trembling. "They're not going to die. You don't know that." "No, but I know they're still fighting, and as long as they're fighting, so are we." She made him look at her. "You hear me? We don't give up. Not on them. Not ever." Something in Wade's face shifted. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something harder, something that looked like determination. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." They went back to the twins' room together. Emma was sleeping fitfully, her breathing shallow and fast. Luke was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Pa?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Am I dying?" Wade sat down on the edge of the bed. "No, son, you're sick, but you're not dying." "Feels like dying." "I know, but you're stronger than this, both of you are." He took Luke's hot hand in his. "Your ma, she fought this same sickness for weeks, fought harder than anyone I've ever known. And she gave that strength to you. You've got her stubbornness, her fire. This fever doesn't stand a chance." Luke's eyes drifted closed. "Miss her." "Me too." Eliza watched them from the doorway, this broken family trying to hold itself together through sheer will. She thought about her own father, about how he'd given up after her mother died. Just stop trying. Let the world beat him down until there was nothing left worth saving. Wade wasn't going to do that, and neither was she. She spent the rest of that night researching every remedy she could remember. Her mother had kept a journal with recipes for medicines, and Eliza had read it so many times after she died that she'd memorized whole passages. Feverfew for headaches, elderberry for immune support, garlic and honey for respiratory infections. The problem was they didn't have half the things she needed. The root cellar had basic supplies, but nothing exotic. She made do with what she had: onion poultices for the chest congestion, sage tea for the fever, steam with pine needles to help them breathe. Wade watched her work with something like hope flickering in his eyes. "Where'd you learn all this?" he asked. "My mother. She was good with herbs, remedies. Said doctors were expensive and plants were free if you knew where to look." Eliza crushed garlic with the side of a knife. "She kept us alive through 2 winters when my father drank away the food money. I paid attention. Thank heaven for that." The 4th day brought no improvement. Both twins were lost in fever dreams, calling out for their mother, crying about things that made no sense. Their temperatures were so high that Eliza was afraid to leave them even for a moment. Wade had stopped sleeping entirely. He sat between their beds like a sentinel, dark circles under his eyes, his face gaunt with exhaustion and fear. Every time one of them coughed, he flinched. Every time they cried out, something in him broke a little more. "You need to rest," Eliza told him. "Can't. Wade, you're going to collapse." "Don't care." His voice was flat, dead. "I wasn't there when Sarah died. Went out to check the cattle, and when I came back she was gone. The twins were holding her hands and crying, and I wasn't there." He looked at her with eyes that were haunted. "I'm not leaving them again." Eliza understood then. This wasn't just about the twins being sick. This was about Wade trying to rewrite history, trying to prove that he could save them when he couldn't save their mother. "Okay," she said softly, "but let me help, please." He nodded and they fell into a new rhythm. Wade stayed with the twins while Eliza handled everything else: cooking, cleaning, keeping the ranch running as best she could. The ranch hands came to the main house for instructions, took one look at Wade's face, and left without asking questions. Tommy, the young hand who'd helped with the skunk incident, lingered. "Kid's gonna make it?" he asked Eliza quietly. "I don't know. Mr. Barrett looks real bad. He's scared and tired and carrying 3 years of grief that he's never dealt with." Eliza handed him a list. "Can you make sure these chores get done? I can't leave the house right now." "Yes, ma'am." He took the list, then hesitated. "Miss Mercer? For what it's worth, you're doing a real good job. Those kids are lucky to have you." She wanted to laugh at that. Lucky. 2 children burning with fever while she threw remedies at the wall, hoping something would stick. But Tommy meant well, so she just nodded and sent him on his way. The 5th night, Emma's fever spiked so high that she started convulsing. Eliza had never seen anything like it. The girl's whole body went rigid, her eyes rolling back, limbs jerking. Wade tried to hold her still while Eliza ran for cold water, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. They packed Emma in wet towels, trying desperately to bring her temperature down. She seized twice more before finally going limp, her breathing ragged but steady. The fever broke slightly, not gone, but lower. Enough to stop the convulsions. Wade held his daughter against his chest and cried. Just sat there on the floor with her in his arms, tears running down his face, shaking with the force of his fear. Eliza had never seen a man cry like that, raw and broken and completely unashamed. She knelt beside them, put her hand on Wade's shoulder, and just held on while he fell apart. "I can't lose them," he choked out. "I can't. They're all I have left." "You're not going to lose them? We're going to get through this." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." She made him look at her. "Listen to me. These kids are fighters. They've spent months trying to run me off with every trick in the book, and I'm still here. You think a fever is tougher than me? Not a chance." Wade laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You're crazy." "Probably, but I'm stubborn, and so are you, and so are they." She touched Emma's forehead gently. "Her fever's lower. Whatever we're doing is working." "She almost died." "Almost isn't the same as did. She's still here, still breathing, still fighting." He nodded slowly, pulling himself back together piece by piece. Emma stirred in his arms, mumbled something about Herbert the frog, then settled back into sleep. They got her back into bed, checked on Luke. His fever was high but stable, and then Wade finally let Eliza convince him to sleep. He collapsed on the cot they'd brought into the twins' room and was unconscious in seconds. Eliza sat between the two beds and watched three people sleep. Outside, the wind howled around the house, driving snow against the windows. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. She was so tired her bones ached, so scared she could taste it. But she didn't move. "You're not going to win," she told the sickness quietly. "I fought worse than you. Poverty, hunger, shame, men who thought I was property they could buy. And I'm still standing, so you might as well give up now." The fever didn't respond. But somewhere in the darkness, she thought she heard her mother's voice. Steady, sure. The same voice that had guided her through her mother's journal, teaching her that sometimes the fight mattered more than the outcome. Dawn came gray and cold. Wade woke with a start, immediately checking on the twins. Eliza had dozed off in her chair and jerked awake at the sound of his movement. "How are they?" she asked, voice rough with exhaustion. Wade pressed his hand to Emma's forehead, then Luke's. His expression shifted. "Lower. Both of them. The fevers are lower." Eliza was afraid to hope. "How much lower?" "Not normal, but not dangerous." He checked again, like he couldn't quite believe it. "They turned a corner. They're actually—" Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked around, confused and weak, but present. Actually present, not lost in fever dreams. "Pa?" Her voice was a croak. "What happened?" Wade's face did something complicated. Relief and joy and residual terror all mixed together. "You were sick, sweetheart. Real sick, but you're better now." "Don't feel better. Feel like I got trampled by horses." "That's how you know you're recovering." He smoothed her hair back. "How's your head?" "Hurts. Everything hurts." She looked past him to Eliza. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" The other ladies always left when things got hard. Emma's eyes were already drifting closed again. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. Someone had to make sure your pa didn't do anything stupid." Emma smiled faintly. "He does stupid stuff all the time." "Hey," Wade protested, but he was smiling too. Actually smiling. Luke woke up an hour later just as weak but coherent. He asked for water, then food, then complained that his throat hurt too much to eat, but he was hungry anyway. It was the most normal thing Eliza had heard in days. Over the next 48 hours, both twins continued improving. The fevers dropped to barely their temperatures. The coughing lessened. They stayed weak as newborn kittens, but they were alive, awake, arguing with each other about who'd been sicker. Wade moved through those 2 days like a man in a dream. He kept checking on them compulsively, touching their foreheads, counting their breaths. Eliza would catch him just staring at them with an expression she couldn't quite name. On the 7th day after it all started, the twins were sitting up in bed arguing about whether Herbert the frog needed a friend. "He's lonely in that jar," Emma insisted. "He's a frog," Luke said. "Frogs don't get lonely." "How do you know? You ever been a frog?" "Have you?" Wade stood in the doorway listening to them bicker, and when he turned to look at Eliza, there were tears in his eyes again. But these were different. These were relief. "We did it," he said quietly. "They did it. Tough kids. We did it too." He took her hand, squeezed it hard. "I couldn't have gotten through this without you. You would have found a way." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." He held her hand a moment longer, then seemed to realize what he was doing and let go. "Thank you. For everything. For staying when it got bad. For not giving up on them. On us." Eliza felt something shift in her chest, something that had been locked down tight since the auction, since her father's death, since all those years of learning not to trust or hope or want. "I didn't stay for you," she said. "I stayed for me. Because for the first time in my life, I had something worth fighting for." Wade looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her, not just the girl he'd rescued or the housekeeper who'd outlasted all the others. Seeing Eliza. All of her. "I'm glad you were here," he said finally. "Me too." The twins recovered slowly. For the next week, they were content to lie in bed and let Eliza and Wade wait on them hand and foot. They milked it shamelessly, demanding stories and special food and complaining dramatically about their suffering. "I almost died," Emma would say whenever she was asked to do something she didn't want to do. I need to rest. You were sick for 5 days and you've been recovering for 8, Wade pointed out. That excuse is wearing thin. But oh, nice try. You're doing your lessons tomorrow. But he said it gently, with so much relief in his voice that the sternness didn't quite land. The twins knew it too. They'd push until he gave them that look, the one that meant he was actually serious this time, and then they'd back off. Eliza watched the family dynamic shift. Before the sickness, Wade had been their father, loved but also the authority, the one who set rules and enforced them. After the sickness, he was different. Softer, maybe. More willing to hold them close, to let them see his fear and his love without hiding behind stoicism. And the twins were different too. Less testing, more trusting, like they'd finally understood that the people in this house weren't going to abandon them. On a quiet afternoon while the twins napped, Wade found Eliza in the kitchen making bread. I need to tell you something, he said. She looked up from kneading dough. Okay. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. For a long moment he just watched her work, and she let the silence stretch. Whatever he needed to say would come when he was ready. When Sarah died, he finally said, I thought I died too. Not physically, but everything that mattered. I was just going through motions, keeping the ranch running, making sure the twins were fed and clothed, but I wasn't really living, wasn't really here. Eliza shaped the dough into loaves, gave him space to continue. Then you showed up. And at first I thought, okay, here's someone to keep the house from falling apart, someone to take some of the burden off, that's all. He paused. But watching you with the kids these past months, the way you didn't run when they tested you, the way you fought for them when they got sick, like they were your own. His voice got rough. You brought this family back to life, Eliza. Not just them. Me too. She set the loaves aside, wiped flour from her hands. Wade, whoa, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know the situation. I know I bought your contract and you're here because you have to be. I just wanted you to know what you've done for us. What you mean, he stopped, corrected himself. What you've come to mean to this family. Eliza's throat felt tight. She thought about the auction platform, about Clayton Voss's smile, about how close she'd come to a life that would have destroyed her. Then she thought about flour on the floor and dead snakes and 2 children who'd stopped testing her because they'd decided she was worth keeping. I'm not here because I have to be, she said quietly. Not anymore. Wade looked up sharply. You told me after a year I could leave if I wanted, remember? She pulled out a chair, sat down across from him. It's been almost 4 months. I could probably walk away right now, and you'd let me go because you're not the kind of man who'd hold someone against their will. I would let you go, Wade agreed carefully. But I'm not leaving. Not because of the contract, not because I have nowhere else to go. She met his eyes. I'm staying because this... She gestured around the kitchen toward the stairs where the twins slept, at the life she'd built here. This is home. More than anywhere I've ever been. And that family upstairs, those 2 terrors who put a skunk in their own room and nearly killed themselves trying to run me off, they're mine now. Not because anyone bought me or because I signed a paper, because I chose them. Wade's expression did something complicated. Eliza, and you. She said it before she could stop herself. You're stubborn, and you carry too much, and you almost worked yourself to death because you were too scared to sleep while your kids were sick. But you're also good, really, genuinely good, and She took a breath. I care about you, about all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. The silence that followed felt enormous. Wade stared at her like she'd just told him the sky was green. You care about me, he repeated slowly. Is that so surprising? Eliza, I bought you at an auction. I'm 15 years older than you. I come with 2 children who are clinically insane and a ranch that barely turns a profit and more emotional baggage than any sane person would want to deal with. He shook his head. You deserve better than that. Better than what? A man who saved me from something worse? Who treats me with respect? Who lets me make my own choices and never once made me feel like property? She leaned forward. Wade, my father was a drunk and a gambler who left me with nothing but debts. The men in Red Hollow Creek looked at me like I was something they could use and throw away. You looked at me and saw a person, someone worth $500 and a chance. Her voice dropped. That's not nothing. That's everything. Wade reached across the table slowly, like he was afraid she'd pull away, took her flour-dusted hand in his calloused one. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Haven't courted anyone since Sarah. Don't even know if that's what this is. We'll figure it out. Eliza squeezed his hand. No rush, we've got time. Yeah. Wade smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Made him look younger, lighter. Yeah, we do. They sat like that for a while, hands linked across the table, flour dust settling around them like snow. Outside, the real snow kept falling, adding to the drifts that had trapped them here together. But trap was the wrong word now. This was where Eliza wanted to be. That night at dinner, Luke announced that he could eat a whole chicken by himself. You can't, Emma said. Your stomach would explode. Would not. Would too. Would not. Enough, Wade said, but he was smiling. Nobody's stomach is exploding at this table. The twins settled into grumbling at each other instead. Eliza served the food, not chicken, just stew, and watched them interact. The easy bickering, the casual touches. Wade's hand on Emma's shoulder as he passed her bread, Luke leaning against his father's arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family. This was what family looked like. After dinner, while Eliza washed dishes, Emma appeared at her elbow. Can I help? The girl asked. That was new. Emma never volunteered for chores. Sure, grab a towel. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma said, Were you scared? When we were sick? Eliza considered lying, decided against it. Terrified. Why? You barely knew us. We were awful to you. You weren't awful. You were protecting yourselves. Eliza handed her a plate to dry. And I was scared because I care about you, both of you, even when you're being terrors. Emma was quiet for a moment. Pa was scared too. I heard him crying. He thought he was going to lose you, like he lost your ma. But he didn't. We're still here. Emma set the plate down carefully. Because you stayed. You kept fighting for us even when it looked bad. That's what you do for people you love. The word hung in the air between them. Love. Eliza hadn't meant to say it out loud, but there it was. Emma looked up at her with those sharp, serious eyes. Do you? Love us? Eliza crouched down so they were eye level. Yeah, kid, I do. Even though we're not really yours? You're as much mine as anyone's ever been. She tucked a piece of Emma's hair behind her ear. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. And I choose you and your brother and your stubborn father every single day. Emma threw her arms around Eliza's neck so suddenly they both almost toppled over. Eliza caught her balance and held on tight, this fierce little girl who'd spent months trying to push her away and was now holding on like she'd never let go. I love you too, Emma whispered. Don't tell Luke. He'll make fun of me. Your secret's safe with me. They finished the dishes together, Emma chattering about Herbert and whether frogs could learn tricks, and did Eliza think they could get a dog when spring came? Normal kid things. Safe things. Later, Eliza stood on the porch and looked out at the frozen valley. The worst of winter was behind them now. Another month, maybe 6 weeks, and the passes would open. The world would come back. But she wasn't the same person who'd left Red Hollow Creek. That girl had been broken, scared, desperate. This woman was stronger, had survived tests she never expected, had found a family in the last place she'd thought to look. Wade came out to join her, carrying his coat. You'll freeze, he said, draping it around her shoulders. I'm fine. Stubborn woman, but his tone was fond. They stood together in the cold, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Emma told me she loves me, Eliza said. Wade smiled. She tell you not to tell Luke? How did you... She did the same thing with Sarah. Declared her love, made her swear not to tell her brother, then told him herself the next day, anyway. He shook his head. That girl's going to be a handful when she's older. She already is. Fair point. The wind picked up, rattling the porch boards. Eliza pulled Wade's coat tighter around herself. Thank you, she said, for bringing me here, for giving me a chance when the whole world had written me off. Thank you for taking it, for staying, for... He gestured helplessly. For all of it. She looked up at him, at this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now... What? Not a stranger. Something more. Something important. We're going to be okay, she said. All of us. Wade nodded slowly. Yeah, I think we are. And standing there on the porch of Frost Ridge Ranch, surrounded by snow and stars, and a future that was finally starting to look like something worth having, Eliza believed it. The slow thaw of late February brought changes that went deeper than melting snow. The twins recovered fully, returning to their usual chaos with an energy that suggested they were making up for lost time. But something fundamental had shifted. They fought less with each other, helped more around the house, and had stopped looking at Eliza like she might disappear if they blinked too hard. Luke started showing her his treasures without being asked. Rocks with unusual patterns, a bird's nest he'd found intact after a storm, a piece of quartz that caught the light. Emma taught Eliza how to braid her hair the complicated way she liked, patient when Eliza's fingers fumbled the pattern. "You're getting better," Emma said one morning, watching in the mirror as Eliza worked. "Ma used to do it exactly like this." It was the first time Emma had compared Eliza to Sarah without it sounding like an accusation. Eliza's hand stilled for just a moment, then continued braiding. "She had good taste in hairstyles," Eliza said lightly. "She had good taste in everything, except Pa. He was kind of a mess when she met him." "I heard that," Wade called from downstairs. Emma grinned. "You were supposed to." The house felt different now. Lighter somehow, despite the lingering cold. There was laughter at meals, conversations that weren't just functional, moments of quiet contentment that Eliza had never experienced before. She'd catch Wade watching her sometimes, not suspicious or calculating, just watching. And when their eyes met, he'd smile in a way that made her forget how to breathe properly. They were dancing around something. Both of them knew it, neither quite ready to name it. March arrived with fall spring, warm days that melted the top layer of snow, followed by freezing nights that turned everything to ice. The ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse like bears from hibernation, squinting at the sun and complaining about winter stiffness. Wade threw himself into ranch work with renewed energy. There were fences to mend, equipment to repair, 1,000 tasks that had been deferred during the worst of winter. He'd leave before dawn and come back after dark, exhausted but satisfied. Eliza watched him work himself to the bone and finally cornered him in the barn one evening. "You're going to hurt yourself," she said. Wade looked up from the harness he was mending. "I'm fine." "You're limping. Old injury. Acts up in cold weather." "Wade," she crossed her arms. "Take a break. The ranch will still be here tomorrow." "So will the work." But he set the harness down, stretched his back with an audible crack. "You sound like Sarah. She used to yell at me for the same thing." "Smart woman." "Yeah." He smiled slightly. "Both of you." They'd started doing this, finding excuses to be alone together. A conversation in the barn, Eliza bringing him coffee while he worked, Wade helping her carry water when the pump froze. Small moments that added up to something larger. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said. "Always." "What do you want? From all this?" She gestured vaguely. "From me being here. From whatever's happening between us." Wade was quiet for a long moment, his expression difficult to read in the dim barn light. "Honest answer? That's the only kind I want. I want to wake up without that emptiness in my chest. Want to look at the future and see something besides just surviving." He met her eyes. "Want to be happy again, and I think—" He paused. "I think maybe I could be. With you." Eliza's heart was doing complicated things. "I don't know how to be what you need. I'm not Sarah. I'm not anyone's idea of a proper wife or mother. I'm just, you're Eliza. That's all I want." Wade moved closer. "You think I don't see you? I've watched you transform this house, turn my wild children into actual human beings. Fight for them like they were yours from the start. You're strong and stubborn, and you don't take anyone's nonsense. That's not nothing. That's everything." "Wade, I'm not asking you to be Sarah," he continued. "I loved her. Part of me always will. But she's gone, and I'm still here. And so are you." He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she didn't, his calloused hand cupped her cheek. "I want a future with you in it. However that looks, whatever you're willing to give." Eliza leaned into his touch without meaning to. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'll ruin this. That I'm not good enough. That the twins will wake up one day and realize they want their real mother, not some girl their father bought at an auction. First of all, you didn't ruin anything. You fixed things I didn't even know were broken. Second, those kids chose you, not because they had to, because they wanted to. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. And third, I didn't buy you. I gave you a way out of a bad situation. What happened after? You staying, becoming part of this family. That was all choice. Yours and mine. When did you get so good with words? I've had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to say. He smiled. Been practicing in my head for about 6 weeks now. Eliza laughed despite herself. 6 weeks? Since the twins got sick. Since I watched you fight for them and realized I didn't want to imagine my life without you in it. The barn was quiet except for the sound of horses shifting in their stalls. Outside, the evening wind rattled the door. Eliza could smell hay and leather and the soap Wade used, and underneath it all, something that was just him. I don't know how to do this either, she admitted. The courting thing, the romance. I've never... She stopped, felt her cheeks heat. I mean, my father scared off anyone who looked at me twice, and then there was never time, and now we figure it out together. Wade's other hand found hers. No rush, no pressure, we've got time. Do we? Spring's coming, the passes will open. Everything changes when the world comes back. Not everything. Not the things that matter. He was standing so close now that she could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes, the scar through his eyebrow, the lines that spoke of too many hard years. He wasn't handsome in any conventional sense, but he was real and solid and looking at her like she was something precious. Can I kiss you? He asked quietly. Eliza's breath caught. I don't know if I'll be any good at... Don't care, Wade smiled. Just want to try, if you want to. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He leaned in slowly, carefully, like she was something fragile. His lips brushed hers gently, just a whisper of contact. Eliza's eyes fluttered closed. Her hands found his shoulders, steadying herself against the sudden rush of feeling. Wade pulled back slightly. Okay? Yeah. Her voice came out breathless. Yeah, that was... You can do it again if you want. He laughed softly and kissed her properly this time. Deeper, surer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other settled at her waist. Eliza kissed him back, clumsy and eager, learning the shape of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. Been wanting to do that for a while, he admitted. Me too. Didn't realize it until just now, but me too. They stood there wrapped around each other, neither quite ready to let go. Outside, someone was calling Wade's name, one of the ranch hands probably. The world intruding on their moment. Wade sighed. I know, but I don't want to. I know that too. Eliza pulled back reluctantly. Go, before Tommy comes looking and finds us like this. Would that be so bad? I'd like to have at least one private thing before the whole ranch starts gossiping. Wade grinned. Fair enough. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet. We'll talk more. Later. When there aren't nosy ranch hands and children who ask too many questions. Looking forward to it. He left, and Eliza stood alone in the barn trying to catch her breath and process what had just happened. She'd been kissed. By Wade Barrett. The man who'd saved her, who'd given her a home, who looked at her like she hung the moon. She touched her lips, still tingling, and smiled like an idiot. The twins noticed something had changed immediately. Why are you all smiley? Luke asked at breakfast the next morning. I'm not smiley. You are. You look weird. Thanks, kid. Real flattering. Emma studied her with narrowed eyes. Did something happen? Nope. Eat your eggs. But Emma wasn't fooled. She kicked Luke under the table, and they exchanged one of those twin looks that meant they were plotting. Wade came in from morning chores, and his eyes went straight to Eliza. Something passed between them. Just a look, nothing obvious, but Emma caught it. Oh, she said slowly. Oh. What? Luke looked between them. What am I missing? Nothing, Wade and Eliza said simultaneously. Emma's grin was wicked. Pa's got a sweetheart. Wade choked on his coffee. Emma, you do. You and Eliza were making eyes at each other. We were not. We're two. Luke, pay attention. They're being all weird and blushy. Luke looked at his father, then at Eliza, then back. His face lit up. Are you going to get married? Nobody said anything about marriage, Wade said firmly. But you like her, and she likes you. That's how it works, right? Luke turned to Eliza. You going to be our new ma? Eliza felt her face go hot. We're not. I think it's a good idea, Emma announced. You already live here, and you're better at cooking than Pa. Plus, you don't yell as much. I don't yell, Wade protested. You yell when we put frogs in the wash water. That was one time. Twice, Luke corrected, and that salamander incident. Wade looked at Eliza helplessly. She bit back a laugh. Listen, Wade said to his children. Miss Eliza and we're figuring things out, but it's private, between us. You two don't get a vote, but we live here too, Emma pointed out. Shouldn't we get a say? Yeah, Luke agreed. What if you pick someone we don't like? They picked me, Eliza reminded them. I thought I wasn't going to last a week, remember? That was before, Emma said dismissively. Before you stayed through the skunk and the sickness and everything. Now you're ours. So if Pa's going to marry you, we should at least get to give our blessing or whatever. Wade rubbed his face. Nobody's getting married. He looked at Eliza. Help me out here. Your father and I like each other, Eliza said carefully, but we're taking it slow, getting to know each other better. There's no rush. But you're not leaving? Luke's voice went small. Even if you and Pa don't get married, you're staying, right? And there it was. Underneath the teasing and the excitement, the real fear that the adults in their life would disappear again. Eliza crouched down next to Luke's chair. I'm not going anywhere. Whether your Pa and I work out or not, I'm staying. This is my home now. You're my family. That doesn't change. Luke threw his arms around her neck. Promise? I promise. Emma was trying hard to look unaffected, but her eyes were suspiciously bright. Eliza held out an arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Emma joined the hug. Wade watched his family pile onto each other and felt something in his chest crack open. This was what he'd been missing. Not just help around the house or someone to cook and clean, but this warmth, this connection, the feeling that his family was whole again. When the twins finally let go and went back to their breakfast, chattering about something else entirely, Wade caught Eliza's eye. She smiled at him, soft and real, and he knew with sudden certainty that he was going to marry this woman. Maybe not today, maybe not even this year, but eventually. She was already his in every way that mattered. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of dance. Wade and Eliza finding moments alone when they could, a walk after dinner, sitting together by the fire after the twins went to bed, stolen kisses in the barn that left them both breathless. But they were careful, conscious of the twins watching, not wanting to move too fast. The problem was that slow felt agonizing. This is torture, Wade muttered one evening. They were on the porch, theoretically watching the sunset, actually just standing very close and not touching because the twins were visible through the window. Whose idea was it to take things slow? Eliza asked. Mine, I think. Terrible decision. The worst. He reached out, fingers brushing hers where they rested on the railing. Even that small contact sent electricity up her arm. I want to court you properly, Wade said. Take you to dances, buy you flowers, all the things I did with Sarah. We're snowed in on a mountain. There are no dances, and flowers won't grow for another month. Eliza laced her fingers through his. I don't need all that. I just need this. You and me and figuring it out as we go. You deserve better than figuring it out. I deserve what I choose, and I choose this. She squeezed his hand. Stop trying to make this into something it's not. We're not some storybook romance. We're two broken people who found each other when we both needed it most. That's enough. Wade turned to face her fully. You're not broken. Neither are you, but we're both carrying damage. And that's okay. She reached up, touched his face. I like you exactly as you are. Stubborn and protective and terrible at taking care of yourself. Don't try to be someone else for me. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Everything else is just us making it complicated. He kissed her then, right there on the porch where anyone could see. Eliza kissed him back, and somewhere inside the house she heard Emma's delighted squeal. "We're never going to hear the end of this," Wade murmured against her lips. "Nope. Worth it, though. Definitely worth it." April brought the real thaw. The snow retreated up the mountains, revealing brown grass and mud, and the promise of green underneath. The passes opened, and suddenly the ranch wasn't isolated anymore. Ranch hands came and went to town. Supplies arrived. The world rushed back in. With it came gossip. Tommy returned from Red Hollow Creek with news that the whole town was talking about Wade Barrett and his bought woman. Half the stories claimed Eliza was basically a slave, worked to the bone and miserable. The other half suggested something more scandalous, that Wade had bought her for disreputable purposes and the children were just a cover. "It's all horseshit," Tommy said bluntly. He'd sought out Eliza specifically to warn her. "But people are talking, thought you should know." Eliza had expected this. Small towns love to gossip, and her situation was too juicy to ignore. "Thanks for the warning. You want me to set anyone straight? I can tell them what it's really like here." "Don't bother. People believe what they want to believe." She handed him fresh bread for the bunkhouse. "Let them talk. We know the truth." But the gossip bothered Wade more than it bothered her. "They're calling you terrible things," he said that night, pacing the kitchen. "Saying I took advantage, that you're trapped here." "I'm not trapped. But the contract is a piece of paper. You already told me I could leave if I wanted." Eliza set down the pot she was scrubbing. "Wade, I don't care what people in town think. They sold me like property, remember? Their opinions don't exactly carry weight." "It's not right. You shouldn't have to deal with that. Life's not fair. We both know that." She dried her hands. "The only opinions I care about are yours and the twins. Everyone else can think whatever they want." Wade stopped pacing, looked at her with something fierce in his eyes. "Marry me." Eliza blinked. "What?" "Marry me. Make it official. Then nobody can say you're here against your will or that I'm taking advantage." He crossed to her in 3 strides. "I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take it slow, but I don't want slow. I want you. As my wife. As the twins' mother. As my partner in this ranch and this life." "Wade, I love you." He said it simply, like stating a fact. "Didn't plan on it. Didn't think I'd ever feel this way about anyone again. But I do. I love you, Eliza Mercer, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Eliza's eyes were stinging. "That's not a very romantic proposal." "I'm not a romantic man." He took her hands. "But I'm an honest one. And honestly, I can't imagine my future without you in it. So marry me, please." She should say no. They'd only known each other 6 months. This was too fast, too much, too everything. "Yes," she said instead. Wade's face transformed. "Yes?" "Yes, you stubborn man. I'll marry you." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "I love you too. Since that night in the barn, probably before. And I want this, you and the twins and this life we're building. So yes." He kissed her hard, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "We should tell the twins," Eliza said. "They're going to be insufferable about this." Completely insufferable. They told them at breakfast the next morning. "We're getting married," Wade announced without preamble. Luke dropped his fork. Emma's jaw fell open. "Really?" Emma breathed. "You're really going to be our ma?" "If you'll have me," Eliza said. Luke was already scrambling out of his chair, throwing himself at Eliza. Emma followed half a second later, and suddenly Eliza was buried in children, both of them talking at once. "Can we call you Ma?" Luke asked. "Do we have to wear fancy clothes to the wedding?" Emma wanted to know. "When is it? Can we help plan it? Do we get cake?" Wade watched his family with a smile that felt like it might split his face. This was everything. They set the wedding for 6 weeks out. Enough time to plan, but not so long that the waiting felt endless. The twins threw themselves into preparations with an enthusiasm that was both touching and exhausting. Emma insisted on helping Eliza make her dress. Luke wanted to know if he could bring Herbert the frog to the ceremony. "No frogs," Wade said firmly. "But he's part of the family." "Herbert stays home." The ranch buzzed with activity. Word spread quickly. Wade Barrett was marrying the woman from the auction. The woman who'd survived the twins and the winter and everything else. People had opinions, of course. They always did. But Wade didn't care, and Eliza had meant it when she said their opinions didn't matter. What mattered was the life they were building. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah's name came up. The twins were in bed, and Wade and Eliza were sitting by the fire. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Wade asked quietly. "About us. About taking her place." Eliza had wondered when this would surface. "I'm not taking her place. She'll always be their mother, your first love. That doesn't change. But you're here now, and I love you, and sometimes I wonder if—" He stopped, struggling. "If she'd be angry that I moved on." Did Sarah seem like the kind of person who'd want you to be miserable forever? No, she was practical, would have told me to stop being stupid and find someone to help with the kids. There you go. Eliza leaned against him. I think she'd be glad you found someone, that the twins found someone. We're not replacing her, we're just continuing the story she started. Wade pulled her closer. You're good at this. Saying the right thing? I'm good at being honest. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling. Outside, spring was taking hold. Soon there would be green grass and flowers and long days of sunlight. The world was waking up, and so was this family. The night before the wedding, Eliza lay awake in her small room, listening to the house settle. Tomorrow she'd move into Wade's room. Tomorrow she'd become Mrs. Barrett, stepmother to 2 wild children, wife to a man she'd never expected to love. Tomorrow, everything changed. There was a soft knock on her door. Emma slipped in, dragging her mother's quilt. Can't sleep? Eliza asked. Emma shook her head, climbed onto the bed. I'm scared. Of what? That tomorrow you'll marry Pa and realize you don't want to be here anymore. That being our ma for real will be different than just living with us. Emma picked at the quilt. The other ladies always left. What if you leave too? Eliza pulled the girl close. I'm not leaving. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You're stuck with me. Promise? I promise. Cross my heart. She kissed Emma's forehead. Besides, where else would I go? This is home. You're home. Emma was quiet for a moment, then, can I show you something? Of course. The girl unfolded the quilt carefully. It was beautiful. Intricate patterns in blues and greens, every stitch perfect. Sarah's work. I got it out, Emma said softly. After we got sick, after you stayed, I thought maybe it was okay to remember again. She ran her fingers over the fabric. Ma made this for me, and she'd want me to share it with you, because you're going to be my ma too now. Eliza's throat was tight. Emma, I know you're not her. I know you're different, but different's okay. Emma looked up with those serious eyes. You're ours now, and we're yours. That's what family means, right? Yeah, kid, that's exactly what it means. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in Sarah's quilt, building a bridge between past and future. Morning came bright and clear. Perfect wedding weather. The ceremony was small, just the family, the ranch hands, and a few people from town who'd made the journey out of curiosity or genuine goodwill. The preacher from Red Hollow Creek performed the service on the porch of the ranch house, with the mountains as witness. Eliza wore a simple dress she and Emma had made together. Wade wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but happy. The twins stood beside them, beaming with pride. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, Luke piped up with, "We already said yes weeks ago," which made everyone laugh. Wade and Eliza exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to be honest, to fight fair, to build a life together. Nothing fancy, just true. When the preacher declared them married, Wade kissed his wife like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. The twins cheered, the ranch hands whistled, and Eliza, who'd stood on an auction platform 6 months ago, certain her life was over, kissed him back and knew with absolute certainty that it was just beginning. The reception was loud and messy and perfect. Tables had been set up in the yard, and the ranch hands had contributed what they could. Tommy brought his fiddle. Another man produced a jug of whiskey that Wade pretended not to notice the twins eyeing. Someone had strung up lanterns that would glow once evening fell. Eliza sat at the head table next to her husband. Her husband, that word still felt strange and wonderful, and watched the celebration unfold. Emma was showing off her fancy braid to anyone who would look. Luke had already gotten cake frosting on his good shirt. Wade's hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yeah, happy." Good terrified or bad terrified? The kind where everything's changing and I don't know what happens next, but I want to find out anyway. Wade smiled. "That's the best kind." Clayton Voss showed up halfway through the meal. Nobody had invited him, but that had never stopped Voss from doing anything. He rode up on a black gelding that was too fine for ranch work, dismounted with deliberate slowness, and walked toward the celebration like he owned it. The mood shifted immediately. Conversations died. Tommy's fiddle went quiet. Wade stood up slowly, his whole body tense. "Voss," he said flatly, "didn't expect to see you here. Heard there was a wedding. Thought I'd pay my respects." Voss's smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Eliza, and there was something ugly in his expression. "Congratulations, Miss Mercer. Or I suppose it's Mrs. Barrett now." "It is," Eliza said calmly. She stayed seated, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "Interesting how things work out. Girl gets sold at auction, ends up married to the buyer 6 months later." Voss shook his head. "Makes a man wonder what kind of arrangement you two really have." Wade moved around the table. "You've got something to say, Voss. Say it plain, and then get off my property. Just making conversation. No need to get hostile." Voss pulled out a flask, took a drink. "Though I have to admit I'm curious. What's a mountain hermit need with a wife? Thought you were happy being alone with your wild children and your failing ranch." Several ranch hands stood up. The atmosphere had gone from festive to dangerous in seconds. "My ranch is doing fine," Wade said quietly. "My children are none of your business, and my wife is definitely none of your business. So I'll ask you one more time. Leave." "Or what? You'll throw me off?" Voss laughed. "You and what help? These boys work for me as much as they work for you. Everyone knows I pay better." Tommy stepped forward. "Actually, Mr. Voss, you're wrong about that. We work for Mr. Barrett because he treats us decent. You might pay more, but there's things worth more than money." He gestured to the other hands. "And right now, we're asking you politely to leave this celebration before it becomes something other than polite." Voss looked around, seemed to realize he was outnumbered. His smile turned nasty. "Fine, I'll go. But Barrett," he mounted his horse, "that contract you hold on the girl, it's worth $800. I'm willing to buy it off you. Consider it a wedding present. Then nobody can say you're keeping her against her will." "The contract was settled the day I paid her father's debts," Wade said. "And even if it wasn't, I wouldn't sell it to you for twice what I paid." "Shame. She might have been worth more in the right hands." Voss tipped his hat mockingly at Eliza. "Enjoy your new life, Mrs. Barrett. Hope it's everything you dreamed of when you were standing on that auction block." He rode off before anyone could respond, leaving a wake of tension behind him. Eliza realized she was shaking. Not from fear, from rage. The audacity of that man, showing up at her wedding, trying to buy her like she was still property to be traded. Wade came back to the table, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry. I should have..." "Should have what? Known he'd show up?" Eliza stood, smoothed her dress with trembling hands. "He's a bastard. We knew that already. Let's not give him the satisfaction of ruining today." "Ma's right," Emma said loudly. "Who cares what Mr. Voss thinks? He's mean, and his horses are always sad-looking." That broke the tension. Someone laughed. Tommy picked up his fiddle again. The celebration resumed, though, with a harder edge now, like everyone was determined to prove they weren't going to let one bitter man spoil things. Later, after the sun had set and the lanterns were glowing and the twins had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Wade found Eliza sitting on the porch steps. "They're asleep," he said, settling beside her. "Finally. Luke tried to convince me he wasn't tired, even though he could barely keep his eyes open." "Sounds about right." Eliza leaned against him. "Hell of a wedding day." "That's one way to put it." Wade wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I meant what I said to Voss about the contract. It's settled. You're free. You've been free since the day you decided to stay." "I know." She turned to look at him. "But he's right about one thing. People are always going to talk. Always going to wonder if I married you because I wanted to or because I didn't have another choice." "Do you care what they think?" "No, but I care what you think. What the twins think." She took his hand. "I need you to know, Wade Barrett, that I chose this. chose you, not because of the contract or because I had nowhere else to go, but because you're good and kind and you look at me like I matter. And those kids up there, they're mine now. Not because you bought me, because I claimed them and they claimed me back. Wade kissed her forehead. I know, but thanks for saying it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. From inside the house came the faint sound of Luke snoring. One of the lanterns flickered and went out. What Voss said about the ranch failing, Eliza said carefully. Is that true? Wade sighed. We're not failing, but we're not thriving either. It's hard running this place alone. Some years are better than others. This winter was rough, lost more cattle than I wanted to the cold. And the equipment's getting old, needs replacing. He shrugged. We'll make it work. We always do. What if we tried something different? Different how? Eliza had been thinking about this for weeks, ever since the passes opened and she'd seen how other ranches operated. Most of the spreads around here just run cattle, but we've got good land, fresh water, timber. What if we diversified? Kept some cattle, but also raised horses. Good ones, the kind people pay premium prices for. And we could log some of the timber, sell it to the mines. Multiple income streams instead of just one. Wade was quiet, considering. That's not a bad idea. But it takes capital to start a horse breeding program. And logging equipment isn't cheap. So we start small. 1 or 2 good mares, build from there. And for the logging, maybe we partner with someone who's already got equipment. Split the profits. She turned to face him fully. I've been managing my father's debt since I was 12, Wade. I know how to stretch a dollar. Let me help with this. Really help, not just cooking and cleaning. You want to run the ranch with me? I want to be your partner. In everything. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? Wade smiled slowly. Yeah, it is. He pulled her close. Okay, Mrs. Barrett, let's see what we can build together. The next months were chaos and hard work and slow progress. Eliza threw herself into learning the ranch business, sitting with Wade while he went over the books, riding out with him to check on cattle, asking questions until she understood how every piece of the operation worked. The twins adjusted to having a mother again in fits and starts. Some days were easy, Emma teaching Eliza which herbs grew wild in the hills, Luke showing her how to skip stones on the creek. Other days were hard, when one of them would slip and call her Eliza instead of Ma, then get upset about it, torn between loyalty to Sarah's memory and love for the woman who was here now. It's okay to love both of us, Eliza told Emma one afternoon. They were working in the garden, planting vegetables for the summer. Your first Ma will always be your first Ma. I'm not trying to replace her, I'm just adding to the story. Emma wiped dirt from her face, leaving a streak. Luke says he's forgetting what she looked like. It makes him feel bad. We've got that tintype. He can look at it whenever he wants. It's not the same as remembering on your own, though. No, Eliza agreed. But memories fade. That's not anyone's fault. It's just what happens. The important thing is remembering how she made you feel. Safe, loved, important. Those feelings don't fade. Emma was quiet for a while, patting dirt around a tomato plant. She used to sing to us at bedtime stupid songs about rabbits and stars and stuff. I can still hear her voice sometimes, but it's getting quieter. You want me to learn the songs? You could teach me, and then we'd both know them. The girl looked up, surprised. You do that? Of course, they're part of your history, part of who you are. I want to know all of it. That night, Emma taught Eliza the bedtime songs Sarah used to sing. Eliza's voice wasn't as pretty, and she fumbled some of the words, but the twins didn't seem to care. They lay in their beds, eyes closed, while Eliza sang about rabbits who lived in the moon and stars that told secrets. Wade stood in the doorway and watched his wife sing his children to sleep using his first wife's songs, and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. All of it. The messy blending of past and present, the imperfect healing, the way his family was learning to be whole again. Summer brought prosperity they hadn't expected. Wade made a deal with a mine owner to log some of their timber, and the first payment was enough to buy 2 promising young mares from a breeder in Helena. Eliza negotiated the price down by 15%, impressing both Wade and the breeder with her stubborn refusal to pay full price. You're terrifying when you negotiate, Wade told her on the ride home. I had a lot of practice with my father's creditors. They taught me never to accept the first offer. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Too late. You married me. You're stuck with my bad side now. The ranch hands noticed the changes. The place felt different, more organized, more purposeful. Eliza had implemented systems for everything from feed schedules to equipment maintenance. She'd also started treating the hands like actual human beings instead of just labor, which meant they worked harder and complained less. Your wife's something else, Tommy told Wade one evening. My ma died when I was young, and my pa just gave up. Stopped caring about anything. But you didn't do that. You found someone who made things better instead of worse. Wade looked over at the house where Eliza was teaching Emma how to make pie crust while Luke helped by eating all the scraps. I got lucky. Luckier than I deserved. Don't know about that. You saved her first. From Voss and whatever he would have done. That's got to count for something. Maybe, but she saved us right back. So I figure we're even. Not everything was smooth. There were arguments about money, about how to raise the twins, about whether they should attend church in town, even though Eliza had complicated feelings about religion after watching her father invoke it to justify his gambling. There were days when the twins pushed boundaries and Eliza had to learn the difference between being their mother and being their friend. Days when Wade's old grief surfaced and he withdrew into himself, and Eliza had to decide whether to push or give him space. They figured it out. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but genuinely. In August, Eliza made her first trip back to Red Hollow Creek since the wedding. She needed supplies that couldn't be ordered, and Wade had ranch business that kept him home. Emma begged to come along, and Eliza agreed, thinking the girl could use a day away from her brother. The town looked smaller than Eliza remembered, shabbier. The auction platform was still standing in the square, and Eliza made herself look at it as they rode past. That's where it happened? Emma asked quietly. Yeah. Were you scared? Terrified. I thought my life was over. Eliza guided the wagon toward the general store. Turns out it was just beginning. Funny how things work out. They did their shopping quickly. Eliza noticed people staring, whispering, let them. She was Mrs. Wade Barrett now, wife and mother and partner in a successful ranch. She didn't owe anyone in this town a damn thing. They were loading the wagon when Horace Drummond approached, the banker who'd taken her house, who'd arranged the auction. He looked older, more worn. Mrs. Barrett, he said carefully, didn't expect to see you back in town. Just picking up supplies. Eliza kept her voice neutral. I heard you married, that you're doing well up at Frost Ridge. He shifted his weight. I wanted to say, what happened with your father's debts, the auction, I want you to know I took no pleasure in it. But you did it anyway. The law required you to settle debts. It didn't require you to sell a human being like property. Eliza looked at him directly. You had choices, Mr. Drummond. You chose the easy one, the one that didn't cost you anything. Drummond flinched. I'm sorry. For what it's worth. It's not worth much, but I'll take it anyway. She climbed onto the wagon. Come on, Emma. We're done here. As they rode out of town, Emma said, You were really brave just then. I was angry. There's a difference. But you didn't yell. You just told him the truth and left. That's brave. Eliza thought about that. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe standing up for yourself without losing control was its own kind of bravery. Your ma would be proud of you, she told Emma. You know that, right? Everything you've done, everything you've become. She'd be so proud. Emma leaned against her shoulder. I think she'd be proud of you too, for taking care of us, for making Pa happy again. Yeah? Yeah, you're good at it, being our ma. Those words stayed with Eliza all the way home. Fall came early that year, the aspens turning gold while the weather was still warm. The twins started real school. Wade hired a teacher from Helena to come stay at the ranch 3 days a week and give proper lessons. Both children fought it at first, but the teacher, Miss Peterson, was young and smart and refused to be intimidated. Your children are bright, she told Eliza after the first week. Emma has a gift for mathematics. And Luke, once we figured out his reading challenges, is exceptional with mechanical concepts. He understands how things work just by looking at them. They get that from their father, Eliza said. The smart part, I mean. The stubborn part is all their mother, both mothers. Miss Peterson smiled. They speak well of you. Emma told me you survived an auction and a skunk attack in the same year. She seems to think you're invincible. I'm really not. But you let them think you are. That's good parenting. The horse breeding program started showing promise. One of the mares was pregnant, and Wade was already planning which stallion to breed the other to come spring. The timber operation brought in steady income. For the first time in years, Frost Ridge Ranch was actually profitable. We could expand, Wade said one evening. They were in his office, their office now, going over the books. Buy more land. Maybe hire another hand or two. Or we could save it, Eliza suggested. Build up a cushion in case we have another hard winter. Always thinking ahead. Someone has to. You'd spend every dollar making the ranch bigger and forget to keep enough for emergencies. That's why I married you, to keep me from doing stupid things. One of many reasons, I hope. Wade pulled her into his lap. Oh, I've got a whole list. Want to hear it? Maybe later. The twins will be home from lessons soon, and I don't want them finding us like this. Like what? I'm just holding my wife. You're doing more than holding. Fine. He kissed her anyway. But we're continuing this conversation tonight. Looking forward to it. Life settled into rhythms. Work and school and family dinners. Wade teaching Luke how to break horses. Eliza and Emma experimenting with recipes that sometimes worked and sometimes ended in disasters that even Herbert the Frog wouldn't touch. Sunday afternoons when they'd all ride out to check on the cattle, then stop by the creek to skip stones and waste time. It was ordinary and precious and everything Eliza had never thought she'd have. In October, a letter arrived from an attorney in Helena. Eliza's father's creditors were satisfied, all debts paid in full, and the contract that had bound her to Wade was officially dissolved. She was free. Had been free for months, legally speaking, but now it was official. Eliza burned the letter in the fireplace and never mentioned it to anyone. That Christmas was different from the quiet one before. They had actual gifts this time. Wade carved the twins new figures for their collection. Horses this time instead of generic animals. Eliza made them coats from fabric she'd ordered special. The twins made a sampler for the wall that said, "Home is where the Barretts are," with only 3 spelling mistakes. On Christmas Eve, Wade gave Eliza a ring. "I know we already got married," he said, looking almost nervous, "but I never gave you a proper ring. This one was my mother's. Figured you should have it." The ring was simple gold with a small stone that caught the firelight. Eliza slipped it on and felt something slot into place. "It's perfect," she said. "You're perfect." "I'm really not. I'm stubborn, and I argue too much, and I can't sing worth a damn." Like I said, perfect. The twins made gagging noises. Wade threw a pillow at them. New Year's came, and with it, the understanding that Eliza had now been at Frost Ridge for a full year, 12 months since the auction. Since Wade had offered an impossible price and taken her away from a fate she still had nightmares about. She stood on the porch on New Year's morning, watching the sun rise over the mountains, and took stock of her life. She had a husband who loved her, 2 children who'd stopped testing whether she'd leave and started assuming she'd stay forever. A ranch that was thriving, a purpose. More than that, she had peace, the kind that came from knowing you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Wade found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders against the cold. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come, all of us." "Long way from that auction platform. Longest year of my life, and the best one." Wade pulled her close. Inside the house, they could hear the twins starting to wake up, arguing about something already. Normal morning chaos. "I never thanked you properly," Eliza said, "for that day, for seeing something in me worth saving." "You don't need to thank me. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it." "We saved each other," Eliza corrected. "You and me and those wild children. We were all broken, and we put each other back together." "Still putting each other back together? Think we'll ever be done?" "I hope not. The putting back together is the best part." Spring came again, and with it the foaling of their first ranch-bred horse. A filly, strong and healthy, with good lines that promised speed and endurance. Wade let the twins name her, and after much argument, they settled on Sunrise. "Because she was born at dawn," Luke explained. "And because new beginnings," Emma added, looking at Eliza. The girl was growing up. Both twins were. Emma was losing the roundness of childhood, getting taller and more serious. Luke was still all energy and chaos, but with focus now, channeling it into learning instead of destruction. They'd be teenagers before long, then adults. Would leave eventually, build their own lives. But right now, they were hers, and she was theirs. And that was enough. In May, Red Hollow Creek held its spring festival. Wade suggested they go, and Eliza surprised herself by agreeing. She'd spent a year avoiding the town, but maybe it was time to stop running from her past. They rode in together, the whole family, and the sight of them must have been something. Wade tall and proud on his horse. Eliza beside him in the wagon, wearing a dress she'd made herself that actually fit properly. The twins in the back, clean for once, looking like actual civilized children. The whispers started immediately. "There's the girl from the auction. Can you believe she married him? I heard she's actually running the ranch now. The children look happy, though. Maybe it worked out after all." Eliza held her head high and let them whisper. She had nothing to be ashamed of. They were browsing the vendor stalls when Clayton Voss appeared. Again. The man had a talent for showing up where he wasn't wanted. "Barrett," he said with false friendliness. "Whole family came to town. How domestic." "Voss." Wade's voice was flat. "We're just here for the festival. Don't want any trouble." "No trouble, just conversation." Voss looked at Eliza. "I heard your ranch is doing well. New breeding program, timber operation. Smart moves." "Thank you." Eliza didn't trust the compliment. "Makes a man wonder how much of that success is you, Mrs. Barrett, and how much is just your husband finally getting his act together." Voss smiled. "Heard you're quite the negotiator, that you handle most of the business now." "We handle it together," Wade said carefully, "as partners." "Of course, partners." Voss's smile sharpened. "Interesting arrangement. Some might say the girl's working off her contract, $800 in labor, 7 years' worth." Eliza felt her temper snap. She'd dealt with this man twice now, both times keeping her composure. But there was only so much a person could take. "I'm going to say this once, Mr. Voss, so listen carefully." Her voice was quiet but sharp as broken glass. "I don't work for my husband. I work with him. We're partners in marriage, in business, in raising our children. The contract that brought me here was settled a year ago. I stay because I choose to, because I love my family and my life, and the home we've built together." She stepped closer, and Voss actually backed up slightly. "You looked at me on that auction platform and saw property, something you could buy and use and discard. Wade looked at me and saw a person. That's the difference between you. That's why he's happy and successful, and you're still alone and bitter, showing up at other people's celebrations trying to poison them with your misery." Voss's face darkened. "You've got a sharp tongue for someone who was sold like cattle." "I was sold like cattle by men like you, men who value money over human dignity." Eliza crossed her arms. "But I survived. I thrived. And now I'm standing here in front of everyone who watched that auction, and I'm not ashamed. You know why? Because there's no shame in being a victim. The shame belongs to the people who created the situation. So you can keep your implications and your sneers. I don't need your approval or your respect. I've got something better. I've got people who actually love me." The crowd that had gathered to watch this confrontation was dead silent. Voss looked around, realized he'd lost whatever game he thought he was playing. "This town used to have standards," he muttered. "This town sold an 18-year-old girl to settle her dead father's gambling debts," Eliza shot back. "Don't lecture me about standards." Voss turned and walked away, his back stiff with anger and humiliation. The crowd slowly dispersed, and Eliza realized she was shaking. Wade took her hand. "You okay?" "Yeah, actually, I think I'm better than okay." She looked up at him. "I've spent a year being polite about what happened to me, letting people whisper and judge and make assumptions. I'm done with that. Done being quiet about it." Emma tugged on her sleeve. "That was amazing. You made Mr. Voss look stupid." "Emma, language." "But he did look stupid. Everyone saw it." Luke grinned. "You're the best ma ever, even better than the first ma, and she was really good." It was the first time either twin had ranked the mothers, and they both froze, realizing what Luke had said. But Eliza just laughed. "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but you don't have to choose. You can love both of us." "Even though one's dead?" Luke asked seriously. "Especially because one's dead. She's part of your story. And now I'm part of your story too. That doesn't erase her. It just means the story kept going. They spent the rest of the day at the festival, and Eliza noticed something had changed. People still stared, still whispered, but now there was something else in their eyes. Respect, maybe. Or at least acknowledgement that she wasn't going to shrink or hide or apologize for her existence. On the ride home, Wade said, "You know you just made an enemy for life, right? Boss doesn't forget things like that. Let him be an enemy. I'm tired of being scared of men who think they have power over me." "I love you," Wade said suddenly. "In case I don't say it enough, I love you for exactly this, for being brave and stubborn and refusing to let anyone make you feel small. I love you too, even though you brought me to a festival where I had to publicly humiliate your neighbor." He had it coming. He really did. The twins were already asleep in the back of the wagon by the time they got home, worn out from the day's excitement. Wade carried Emma inside while Eliza guided Luke upstairs, the boy half walking, half being dragged. Later, after the children were properly in bed and the house was quiet, Eliza and Wade sat on the porch like they did most nights. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked. "Staying here, marrying me, taking on all this chaos." "Every day," Eliza said. He looked startled, and she smiled. "I'm joking. No, I don't regret it, not even a little." She leaned against him. "This is the life I was supposed to have. I just had to go through hell to get here." "If you could go back and change things, skip the auction, avoid all of it, would you?" Eliza thought about that. Really thought about it. The humiliation of standing on that platform, the terror of not knowing what would happen, the months of feeling like she was one mistake away from losing everything. "No," she said finally, "because all of it brought me here, to you and the twins and this ranch and this life. And I wouldn't trade this for anything, not even to erase the bad parts." Wade kissed the top of her head. "You're something else, Eliza Barrett. So are you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the hills, a coyote called. The wind moved through the pines with a sound like whispered secrets. "What do you think happens next?" Wade asked. "For us, I mean." "We keep building, keep growing, raise those kids until they're ready to take on the world." Eliza smiled. "Maybe add a few more kids to the mix if we're feeling ambitious." "You want more children?" "Maybe. Eventually. Or maybe we adopt some. There are always kids who need homes." She shrugged. "We've got love enough to share." "We do," Wade agreed. "More than I thought possible." Years would pass. The twins would grow up and have their own adventures, their own heartbreaks, their own triumphs. The ranch would thrive and struggle and thrive again, as ranches did. Eliza and Wade would have fights and reconciliations, bad years and good ones, moments of doubt and moments of absolute certainty. But through it all, they'd have each other. They'd have the family they built from broken pieces. They'd have the home that started with an impossible bid at an auction and became something neither of them could have imagined. And on quiet nights, when the work was done and the house was peaceful, they'd sit on this porch and remember how far they'd come. From auction block to marriage altar. From strangers to partners. From broken people barely surviving to a family that thrived. The mountains would stand witness, ancient and unchanging, holding their stories close. And in the valley below, Frost Ridge Ranch would glow with lamplight and life. A beacon of hope for anyone who'd ever thought their story was over, only to discover it was just beginning. Eliza Barrett, once Eliza Mercer, once a gambler's daughter with nothing but debts and desperation, had found her place in the world, not through luck or charity, but through her own stubborn refusal to give up, through choosing love when it was offered, through fighting for the people and the life she wanted with everything she had. And that, she thought, was worth more than any amount of money, worth more than respectability or approval or the opinions of people who'd written her off before they knew her story. She'd been bought at auction for $500, but she'd earned her freedom, her family, and her future through courage and choice and the simple act of staying when everyone expected her to run. And she'd never been more free in her life.